Welcome to Rauta, welcome to Akhlys interview. This is something special in so many ways. I'm gonna try to explain why, but first of all, we're gonna introduce the man of the hour. Welcome to Rauta, welcome to Finland, welcome to my home city of Turku. You've been touring a little bit, and we're gonna talk about that, but first of all, which name you wanna go to the audience by?
Naas is fine, yeah.
So you have quite a few gigs now, Europe, and now we're here doing a few cities in Finland as well.
Yeah.
And before the camera started rolling, you mentioned that you have had quite a bit of shitty luck going on. Everything. You want to enlighten how wonderful this touring life can be?
The worst of luck with travel and our gear, none of it showed up. So the airlines lost it. It was kind of deja vu for us because our last European tour, the airlines lost our gear. And we have a lot of very specific things, especially with even not just some electronic items, but even with our guitar, specific tuning, and then showing up and having to play pretty much immediately. Got to Poland, and it's not as simple as just borrowing someone else's guitar, because then you tell them that you've got to reset up the whole thing, re-intonate it, and they're like, no, that's not happening. So we were able to borrow, and purchase, and after I think we've spent about $3,000 at this point, and ran around all over and had to purchase whatever we could find, and we barely pulled it off. So it wasn't necessarily the best start in that regard, but the shows have been absolutely killer. So.
You have had your shitty luck before than this, not only in terms of losing luggage. You have been also targeted by this kind of a canceling culture and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Why is it that? Why are you kind of accursed in these ways? What is the reason, in your opinion?
I think maybe we're the newest band to cancel, perhaps. I mean, the cancel culture stuff has gotten so out of control with this kind of 6 degrees of separation and offense, and really, at the end of the day, it's pretty fucking silly, because you're not going to find anything too politically controversial within Akhlys and or even my previous bands. So, I don't know. I think we've always been very invested in occultism, and you've got occultists from the turn of the century, and some of them had shady political pasts or different things from either side of the spectrum, and that's not something that we've ever focused on. But if you dare invoke any of these names, that's what they're going to look at, and that's what they're going to apply.
Like Googling every possible detail and trying to find that one spot they can cling to and try to see if that shit flies.
Well, yeah, and then they very much cherry pick. You can look. A lot of this flack came from my last band, Nightbringer, and they'll point out that we had quoted Julius Evola as a good example. Yeah. And it's how about in Ego Dominus Tuus, the use of Shin, Teth, and Nun, Kabbalistic Hebrew symbols and letters, and that's in there, and then other aspects from other cultures, a lot of stuff from Sufism, for example, and all these things are in there, but they just kind of they ignore that and go, no, this one thing.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that if you have elements from, say, black and white or left and right, they just kind of ignore. Okay, you have the whole palette there, but we're just gonna go for the toxic shit or the dangerous stuff, or just something that can go for, and it seems like kind of a pointless, and I think also, how to say, like cherry picking. It also sounds like it's kind of like a witch hunt happening in all that stuff.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
how does it make you feel as an artist, trying to express your own lyrics and bringing your own art and music in various ways, and then being kind of had this witch hunt part?
That's frustrating. A lot of the evidence, quote unquote, that they peddle. A lot of it's just kind of old, tired shit taken out of context. And so that does get old, especially when you do get fully canceled because of it. And it's like, well, if you have a problem with our music, then don't fucking listen to it. Don't go to our show. But then they try to kind of exaggerate it to the point that even our very presence creates a threat to a community. And I'm like, this is so fucking far-fetched.
Yeah,
there's
like a small underground band from the United States going to threaten the world.
Yeah, there's no threat to anybody's community. And even a lot of the people that have participated in my bands, either from artists or or even past members come from different cultures and different backgrounds. So it just doesn't really make sense. But at the end of the day, these people have already made up their mind. They're
so deep in their own foxholes. It's kind of hard to climb up on.
Yeah, you're already guilty, and they're the jury, and they're the executioner, and that's their role. And I think it makes them feel very much empowered when they probably don't have a whole lot going on in their life anyhow. And so I think maybe it's kind of addictive in a way for them,
Yeah, I guess you kind of get the feeling like, hey, I've accomplished something behind my keyboard.
Yeah.
Finally got a show canceled, or some people lost their gig, and so this is me ruling the world and all that stuff.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and and it's so funny because I can, I've done so many interviews over the 20 years, and you won't find a single one where there's a racist remark.
Yeah.
So that's a bit. Ironic. So it's frustrating. It's something that obviously many people are dealing with, and in much bigger ways than I am. So you just roll with it. You just adjust as best you can, and move on and move forward. And like I said, these people that are having these issues, they've already made up their mind. It doesn't matter what you say, what you do, and we're not going to pander to these people because fuck them. So
you move on, and that's it.
Yeah, you move on. Yeah.
Now, talking about your music, I've been listening to black metal, I don't know, some 30 years by now, but only, I guess, some very, very few bands get to the level of darkness what you have in your music, and it's been described as like black metal of nightmares or those kind of topics. And today I was actually doing some kind of yard chores, taking care of the mowing the lawn and shit like that in sunshine. And already when I was listening to your whole discography, reminding how dark is this music, I already started seeing those dandelions turning into some Lovecraftian beast because my mind was taking their darkness so much in. And I was just, asking myself okay, today when we have this interview, I can ask, how the fuck are you able to put so much darkness and these nightmarish elements into music that translates so well, being indeed nightmarish? Sure.
I think, it comes from the heart, it's genuine. It's something that's always been a part of me even since I was a kid, and so, of course, once I became a musician and then started, moving into stuff like black metal as a teenager, I kind of started seeing elements at first perhaps in other bands that I found that were kind of held that kind of aura of nightmare and dreadfulness, and that was obviously spoke to me, and so I started kind of formulating my own vision. And over time, where at first it starts off as influences from other bands, over time you learn how to make it your own, and make it kind of a more of a signature sound and aesthetic and aura. And then a lot I'm drawing on from personal experiences, especially around dreams, which is a big important subject matter within the band, and then stuff related to dreams, and then through kind of an occult lens, because that's where I spend a lot of my time is in the world of the esoteric, and so I'll find certain aspects within that that frame it up that way, and so I think that just naturally kind of is my muse, and so leads me artistically and musically in that direction.
So what is so important to you in the literature of being occult, esoteric, and those topics we should not be there to talk about, and some bands even won't talk about it, we don't do interviews because this is so much deeper into our persona and something that is not so much easy to explain, but you're ready to go forward with it, so what's the story with occult and esoteric for you?
Well, for me, I mean, that's kind of that would be a very broad question, but specifically for the aspects that influence my music, there's kind of an aspect of dread, and dread is seen as a gateway to an ecstatic state, which this concept is quite old, and it goes back to the Greeks. So they had various ways to reach these ecstatic states, whether it was Dionysian through kind of intoxication, or sexual acts, these kind of things. But dread was certainly one of them, and cultivating that dread until you reach kind of this manic, ecstatic state. And I have a personal link with that through certain parasomnias and dream experiences ever since I was a kid. So that was kind of, my terrible negrito that I went through as a child, and then started, interestingly enough, started becoming more and more attracted to it and finding it as an empowering thing. So that aspect and of course when we say occult, again, that's a very broad and loaded term. Right, exactly. But in various, even in older actual traditions, you can find synonymous things there, and not just with like the Greeks, but also in the East with stuff like the tantrics, like the Vamamarga, Vamakara. There's a lot of adverse practices and stuff put on to an emphasis again on terror and dread, and then again dreams. So yeah, these are the things that interest me, and they're kind of all over the place culturally. So it's a very broad and steep subject. So, yeah.
I think this is a kind of a subject we could talk for hours.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Into introduction part of the whole thing.
Sure.
Obviously, we don't have the luxury of time, so we have to kind of move on with that. Are you addicted to these, like you said, dread and darkness or that stuff, or is it more like how do you vent out the kind of a negativity in yourself?
No, I'd say that it's more an attraction. It's more of a magnetism. And so when cultivating these dreadful states, usually, which, there's different modes to do that. One that is maybe more common, or at least more common in my experiences, through like what would be called like hypnagogic or hypnopompic states. That's usually falling into sleep or falling out, but also can occur during a proper dream state, like REM state, and anything from stuff that can occur around sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is a tricky one because it's well understood scientifically now, and what occurs in the body, the motor system is shut down, and so you can't move, and so there's a tendency to just say that there's this whole mythology that the ancients came up around that because they didn't understand the actual scientific mechanism. But what they don't really understand very well are the what they would term hallucinogenic visions, because you're not properly dreaming, because you're seeing your surroundings perfectly.
So you're in kind of in between state.
Yes, exactly. Liminal. Yeah, and so it is a liminal state. Anyhow, that could be one mode. There's also other kind of meditative modes that you can enter into, where you are purposefully kind of stoking this flame of fear and dread. And as that occurs, almost a hidden aspect of yourself, you'll notice, will start to rise, and that's kind of like Plato's divine madness, or the mania. Some people would term it as like their otherness, or maybe their shadow self, or their daemon. And so that is one thing that's it's important to me. So even though some of these things on a certain level, like a profane level, obviously anything that's terrifying is exactly that. So it might be you're not enjoying it per se. I mean, you're shifting out into a truly ecstatic state, so you're kind of beyond any of that anyhow. So yeah, that is the direction that I go with these things.
Do you ever feel like this is like too much to handle, like too much fear or some other anxietal states that like, okay, I cannot handle this, I have to kind of survive it?
Yeah, and there's usually within these moments when they do occur, like I said, a lot of it you're not in a regular kind of discursive mental mode anyhow, because they're not just occurring spontaneously. They're occurring again during kind of a hypnagogic state or something akin to that, depending on what the situation is. But there is like a culmination, and it does. It does lead to typically a breaking point, and that breaking point is where it does become too overwhelming. And so if this was happening during semi-sleep or even a dream or something, this is probably where you'd end up waking up immediately with a shock, and perhaps sitting upright or
sweating.
Yeah, sweating, and so it is. Yeah, there is a point where you are overwhelmed. I'd say hypothetically speaking, trying to cultivate a path to where you can endure that longer and longer and longer, because with that comes a longer moment of that ecstatic state. And these ecstatic states, the Greek philosophers kind of equated that with receiving wisdom. So it's beyond the discursive again, so it's hard to articulate, but yeah.
Can you develop some kind of tolerance or resistance towards these kind of feelings?
Yeah, sure. I think that's the point. Is that you learn to be able to endure them, and endure them to greater degrees. And so I think that's the important thing that you would want to, because you don't want to just do anything just for the experience or the fright of it or the thrill. That's not what it's about at all. Matter of fact, sometimes some of these things are so potent that it can really leave you shaken up for many days. And the interesting thing about it is this is something even many people that are not invested in occultism have maybe experienced at least some of this, especially with the some of the sleep paralysis stuff, or like the out-of-body experiences that can occur during dreams or other uncanny things that really can shake people up. I think that a study I read, it was like 1 in 5. 1 in 3, I think this was it's specific to Americans. 1 in 3 Americans have experienced sleep paralysis. That's not so uncanny, but 1 out of 5 have experienced sleep paralysis with like the hallucinogenic hypnopompic visions. And a lot of those visions have a lot of specificity, which often are cross-cultural, like the appearance of a shadow man is one of them, and there's other variations to, depending. So it's an interesting thing to look at.
How important science and scientific ways to understand and describe and learn is to you, in addition to having these occult ways to experience it?
I think it's incredibly important. I've said this before, but I kind of refer to myself as the skeptical occultist. I think that's a good mindset to have. You don't want to get lost into some kind of a gross New Age mysticism where everything has this great importance and meaning at all times. I think that you're not going to be doing yourself any favors by that, and you're going to quickly lose any grip on what's the real world at large. So. But I don't think that the existence of one doesn't cancel out the other. So, I am fully believe in science and the sciences, and I think that it's been a very positive thing in some regards. In other ways, we can say that there's some negative things there, but it is it plays by it plays by its own playing field, of course, and it is absolutely quantitative while it disregards the qualitative. The qualitative aspects, and so I think that the sciences and even psychology, they are very valid, and they are stuff that we should always keep in mind. Don't go to the most fantastical conclusion immediately, but they are pieces of a much greater puzzle, and that puzzle, I think, becomes truly ineffable. That we'll never be able to encapsulate true reality to the degree that science would like to. So
there's always kind of a beyond.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now, talking about this fantastic topic is something that most people are like maybe unheard of, but don't necessarily, most definitely not understand it fully, even the basic levels of things. I don't dare to say I understand more the basics of occult and esoteric topics. And obviously we all have parents and families and shit like that, and they might be saying no, don't go there, not understand that.
Yeah.
So how is your non-black metal friends and family people and all that stuff, how welcoming or understanding they are to this world of yours?
Well, I guess it would depend on the individual. I mean, I'm very close with my family, but many of my family members probably have no idea exactly of what I'm into, because we don't bother talking about it, because it's not something that they would understand or care to understand. More so, maybe with people like that, maybe we can get into maybe more philosophical conversations that don't necessarily cross over into the occult. But and then again, I've got other friends that aren't into black metal but are completely into occultism. So it's kind of interesting,
Yeah,
so
that's like overlapping circles.
Yeah,
in a way.
yeah. So it just depends on the individual, and it's not something that I try and project as part of my outward persona. So I'm not going around doing that. So I think it's not so problematic. Whether it's at work or at a family gathering.
It's not like a Christmas table talk, like when you're cutting the turkey. Oh, by the way, did you read that book where they're talking about these old school Hebrew philosophical occult questions? No, what's it all about?
Nothing like that. Me and my mother, at once in a blue moon, will get into religious conversations. She is a Catholic. I was raised Catholic, and I'll find maybe some points that I think are interesting that we can discuss in a way that's not going to just end up being totally antagonistic. So but it's rare. So
I guess Catholicism is not exactly in quick terms with black metal. More like black metal is not even the slightest tolerant about Catholicism and all that stuff, for rather obvious reasons.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, talking about that, you're not exactly a young guy, so obviously you weren't really growing up with 2000s black metal, but your roots go way early. What brought you into metal and later on to marry this occult and esoteric side of things?
I think at the very earliest, before I was even a metal, Guns N' Roses was my first true love, and I was in an elementary school. But I think that what was relevant there is I really liked the rebellious spirit of it, right? Kind of this outlaw rebellious spirit of that band. And then shortly after, I discovered Metallica. I think I might have been 12 years old, something like that. And once I discovered Metallica, I had went into junior high, and so I kind of met a whole new friend group that was also into these things, and they introduced me into the world of thrash, larger world of thrash beyond Metallica. And they all played guitars, and so I got a guitar and started hanging out with them, and we kind of went. I kind of went on a weird journey, because then it was most of them decided quickly that metal wasn't cool anymore. They wanted to do punk rock, more like crust and stuff like that. So I was still at a very young age at this point. So I just wanted to play in a band, really. So kind of started there. But then once I took over writing stuff in certain bands, I think everyone noticed that it was going in a much heavier direction. Yeah. To the point that maybe some of them didn't like it so much. And so then I realized it's time to quit this and find other guys and do what I'm really, really trying to do here. And so, I discovered, death metal and black metal.
The kind of a typical path in a way. You start with kind of a hard rock, and then you find thrash metal and the bigger mainstream metal ends, and then you kind of go deep into the rabbit hole. Yeah,
exactly. So once I had discovered black metal, I just knew that's exactly what I wanted to do. I was already very much obsessed with, I guess you could say, dark things in general. Yeah. So it really made sense for me. So then I kind of left all, those previous bands behind, and then I just started doing the search for members, which is hard to do when you're a teenager. So especially living in Colorado, but eventually was able to pull a group of guys together, and one of them is here tonight playing in my band still. So we played in our very first band together. So
what was that name, by the way?
Of our very first band, it was Nihilistic. Oh no, it was. Insurgents was the name of the very first band, and I think we were 14 years old when we started it. Yeah.
So not exactly a mature band, but what a good name though.
Yeah. So we've been doing it for a while. So.
This is something that is very, very interesting to me personally, because obviously we all have a little bit different path, but however, once again, despite geographical or even cultural differences, a lot of people seem to find their way to metal in the same ways. And sometimes I think the younger audience, who are mystifying whole black metal community, if you're going to call it that, are all forgetting that we didn't kind of got spoon-fed our dark thrones and whatever, but before we get into those bands, there were lots of easier, lighter bands, and those are kind of bands that define us in so many ways, and we kind of, in a way, also pay homage to them. So, at which point you realized, these bands, for example, Guns N' Roses and Metallica, too easy, too mainstream is for me. Now it's now I'm in the cult, now I'm in the underground. At which point were you this is the door, I'm not going back
I think I'd probably discovered death metal first, and that was especially back in the 90s. Headbangers Ball was such a big thing.
Triple Trash Treat.
Yeah, and they would have a thing at the very end where they'd play some of the heavier stuff, and discovering stuff like Morbid Angel, and so when I saw that, I mean, immediately I was just like, this is so fucking evil. Like, I was so fascinated by it, and so I started just. Of course, this is back in the day of like you either have to go to a record store that has these things, which we had one, luckily in my hometown that was specific to death and black metal. I ended up working there years later, but we had that, but a lot of it was mail order, and not just mail order, but you had to send away to get the fucking catalog to come to begin with, and so it was a lot of just guessing. You thought an album looked cool, a logo looked cool,
with like an evil name or a good cover, and you could like, could I invest $20 in that?
Or you read a review or interview or whatever, and I think that's how it really started. And then when I discovered black metal, the biggest one for me right away was Emperor. So, of course, this is, again, mid-90s, so it was earlier Emperor, and that really, I knew exactly the direction I wanted to go. Even the with the kind of approach to black metal that they took, which was kind of more seemed based in like mysticism and instead of so much like maybe like warfare or misanthropy, this seemed like more of kind of this very
like a thinking man's black metal.
Exactly, like kind of sophisticated, and very dark, and very well thought out. So I was very intrigued by that. Of course, I like stuff that's harsher and more barbaric as well, but that's the one that spoke to me the most, and so that was a huge influence on me was the early releases by Emperor, and then some other bands around that, like the Thorns demos and Mains from Trondheim.
So Norwegian black metal.
A lot of Norwegian, mostly Norwegian. Some of the Swedish stuff too. But that was my biggest influence.
Kind of golden 90s in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that was the most influential to me at the beginning. So yeah.
Now your music being nightmarish, getting back to that very topic, is also interesting to me. That I don't know if how many in the audience knows, but you don't necessarily play just black metal or even metal. You also have a lot of dark ambient parts, which are a big part of the whole nightmarish, super dark atmosphere. But which goes first? Creating those darker ambient parts or creating those nightmarish riffs?
So it can go either way. There's sometimes where I just sit down with my guitar, so very traditional, and next thing you know, I've come up with some riffs, and so I'll sit down and I'll start laying these things out or tracking them. I've got my own little home studio where I can do this. But then other times I can start off just on a synthesizer doing keyboard stuff, doing some ambient stuff, and all of a sudden that can lead into a whole song. Sometimes it's just entirely ambient, but other times there's Akhlys songs I've written that I started with on the keyboard.
Yep.
And then next thing I know, I'm bringing guitar into it. So it can go either way, and I try to keep that in mind, especially now working on a new album. And that just kind of just happened randomly, but now I'm trying to keep that in mind to remember to do both approaches, because I think that's kind of how the beauty of the last two albums occurred, was it came from both sides. So
now, you mentioned already your kind of black metal inspirations, like bands that you got like inspiring you to do riffs and play metal in the first place. What about these ambient inspirations? What kind of names kind of took you in with that, like, okay, I got to go into this world of nightmares?
Sure. I think the biggest one for me first I discovered Mortis, as many do that are into black metal, which then that led me to Cold Meat Industries.
I was guessing that or Loki Industries or whatever.
Yeah, and then Loki Foundation and all that good stuff, Cyclic Law and all those. But at first it was definitely Cold Meat. And Aghast. So once
that's a really, really dark one.
Very dark, and see that is exactly my cup of tea right there.
Yeah.
So and so it's just so haunting. But there have been others. In Slaughter Natives was a huge one for me.
But it's more in the industrial.
That goes on more the industrial side for sure. And then stuff like Sephiroth.
That's kind of a classic.
Yeah, Archon Satani, Desideri Marginis. Yeah, I could go on and on and on. More recently, stuff like Trepannerings Ritualen. And then a long-time fan of MZ412.
Oh, yeah.
And Nordvarger.
Yeah. Other classic bands which are very old school.
Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of fortunate because I was able to go to the Cold Meat Industry, that first reunion festival they held in Sweden so many years ago, and so it was. It was kind of a good opportunity to see all these classic bands, these acts that you probably won't get to see often. So
not even here, even though we're close to Sweden. I've seen some dark ambient gigs actually here in my home city, but nowadays they are very, very rare.
Very rare, yeah.
And it's kind of like even harder to get a cult dark ambient or say martial industrial act on stage rather than some cult underground black metal bands. It's like so marginal.
Yeah. And truthfully, I mean, these days, and it's been this way for a long time, I listen to more dark ambient and dark industrial than I do metal. Yeah. So that comprises the majority of my listening these days. So
does time of day or season of the year affect which way you go?
Yeah, sure. I'll notice that there'll be an influence on that. Like, especially, I live in a very rural area. I live up in pretty far in the mountains, actually. And so when October rolls around, it's a very charged and atmospheric time, and so that will lead me to want to hear certain albums that I associate with that time.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely for sure.
Because I've been always feeling like when it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, for some reason if I'm still awake, that's the kind of now go for the minimal dark ambient, and it's all about creating the darkness inside. But during daytime, I cannot even imagine let's go for lull or sleep research facilities.
Yeah.
Now I need to kind of slay your aggression or whatever.
Yeah. You might put on Bestial Warlust instead or something. Yeah,
it's kind of it's a hormonal thing or whatever, but it definitely seems like my subconscious is almost like, okay, I'm gonna do a little bit DJing for you.
Yeah.
Like kind of overriding the rational side of things and all that stuff. But does it happen with you when you write music?
I definitely get influenced by, especially seasonal, I noticed. So I seem to have kind of this spike of inspiration during the fall.
Yep.
And then that kind of carries on through winter, especially with the darkness and the inclement weather and stuff like that. And I see that it kind of evens out or kind of dries out a little bit once we start getting into spring and summer. And maybe that's usually when I start doing maybe the more less interesting technical aspects of recording, that have to be done, and less of the creative stuff. And then the year rolls around and it comes back again, and I really try and pay attention to those windows and make good use of them. So yeah.
How about writing lyrics? Is there a seasonal change also?
Yeah, I would say that's fair. Although sometimes just when the muse strike, it just can come out of nowhere sometimes, So sometimes I could even be inspired by something that I was reading or a dream I had or, some piece of good cinema that, got my thoughts going. And writing lyrics for me can be very spontaneous sometimes, but so just when that lightning strikes, I make sure to try and sit down and start writing down ideas. So, yeah.
Does writing lyrics get easier or harder by age?
I don't necessarily know if it's gotten easier or harder. I think it's kind of stayed on its same course. I feel like I can only do it when I do feel that inspiration strike. The same can be said for music to a degree. I can pick up my guitar and maybe not feel so inspired, but if I sit there long enough, I might start to get inspired. With lyrics, it's usually it has to be that moment, and so lyrics are kind of come more sparsely, I guess, but also are less time intensive, I suppose, than having to write all the guitars and the bass and the keyboards for an entire album. So yeah. But it all seems to somehow work out in tandem by the time it's done. So,
which is more important, live or studio work?
I'd say studio work. I do. Of course, I appreciate the live element very much because then it's very real, less controlled. That's when there's an element of chaos there, and I don't know. There's something protean about it because it changes every time you do it. But of course, you need that foundation there. You know, you need to be the alchemist in his lab first and foremost, where you have set the foundation for what the album's going to be. And so I think that's because, I mean, without that, there's not going to be the live aspect. So, so that's where, and of course a lot of the band is so personal to me, and I do most of the material on my own. I track on my own, except for drums, of course, because I'm not a drummer. Yogan handles that and does it brilliantly. But so I'm spending just hours and hours and hours and months and months and months by myself in this creative mind state, and so it becomes almost holy in a way. And so that aspect is good. It's sacred. And then I see when you play live, when it's done right and things come together well, it's almost like now it's the sermon, you know. And there are elements in that are maybe a little more Bacchic or like Dionysian, you know, more on the wild side and the revelry and those kind of things. So I do appreciate that side too.
Now, black metal is obviously known for a lot of misanthropy and all that stuff. Like, we're not going to be the herd animals, and we kind of reject the sheep mentality and all that stuff. But when you see a lot of black metal bands on stage, there's actually strong interaction with the audience, like almost like founding that connection, which is not with the everyday folk. Do you see a contradiction there, or is it something different when it happens with the audience and the live stage?
I mean, I think it could be either. I mean, it probably just depends on the band and the situation, and whether, you know, if it's genuine or not. It's hard for me to say. I mean, I've never done a whole lot of interaction with the audience myself. I tend to zone out and forget they're there almost at points. So to the point that we've gotten criticism for maybe not being the most exciting band live because we didn't interact, or we didn't, you know, and those things for me personally, for my band, I really don't care about so much. I don't really think that we need to get the audience to chant with us or do any of those.
It would even feel kind of weird if a Nightmare is bad is going to engage with the audience, like let's slap hands and like do those live speeches, like come on, I want to see you. It would be fucking weird.
No, I totally agree, and I've always thought for what I'm doing, I mean, I don't even introduce the songs. You know, you get what you get. You know, for me, I think if someone's in tune with what we're doing, then it's going to be more kind of a hypnotic experience instead of kind of maybe less of like the metal party experience, and so that's important to me. So
now, one thing with which you mentioned was the drums, and when I was listening, revisiting the discography today, and I was thinking about a lot of these songs have really, really high tempo, which is something that is, in a way, if I may explain, is a little bit weird, because a lot of like super dark bands, especially Funeral Doom ones, well, they are super dark, super heavy, but also super fucking slow. So it's like almost grinding to a halt. But you go exactly the opposite way. Like, okay, super dark, very nightmarish riffs, and even dronier parts, and with the ambience, but it's always like a lot of blasting. So how do you? I mean, it's kind of a trademark of you, but how do you justify it, for the lack of a better word?
I think with my whole concept around the terror, the dread, there is a and a certain level of frantic anxiety to it, you know, and
kind of a manic.
Manic. Exactly, manic. And so that kind of encapsulates that feeling that you know, when you're shifting into that ecstatic state of dread, it's not a melancholic, slow, creeping dread. It is, you know, you are caught up in the moment of absolute terror, you know, so it has a bit of furor to it. And so that's why I do, of course, you know, we will have some slower ambient pieces or some of that building ominous sounds before it just all hell breaks loose. But yeah, that's the way I look at it with my approach, because I think it needs to be kind of this frantic whirlwind of just terror. So, all
right, we're gonna start closing in and finishing the whole stuff here. Now, I hope there are some people in the audience on the other side of the camera like, okay, this sounds very interesting, and I'm like signing up for that stuff, but I don't know where to start. And one of my favorite questions is like, I mean, this is the kind of a kill your darlings phase, obviously. But if you could to choose, like, okay, this is the starting point for a new Akhlys fan, like maybe the song or two of songs, like where you should start in a way that you can really dive into the world of this nightmare.
I would say possibly on the last album, the song Negalion, and just a personal favorite of mine. I think that song has has every element of Akhlys all within one song. So, you know, it does start off kind of with an ominous build and this kind of prolonged intro that kind of keeps building and building and building. And then when it takes off, it really takes off and, you know, has a rather dramatic culmination near the end. And so, yeah, that's if I had to pick a favorite song, that would be it. And so that would probably be my suggestion to anybody that was interested in checking out our sound.
All right. Yeah. Now, if you get to choose, let's predict that once you have done a new album, you start touring a little bit more, and you could choose your favorite partner in crime, any band in the world. Who would you go with if you got to choose the absolute power? Like, here it is, one wish.
Oh man, that would be a tough one. The first thing that came to mind is Drastis from France, but they don't play live, so I guess that one wouldn't work.
But I mean, Perfect World and all that stuff.
No, that's who I would go with. That's one of my favorite black metal bands to this day is Drastis, and one that I just have a lot of respect for, and seems to really kind of be in my same kind of wheelhouse of influence and approach. And so, yeah, that's the one I would go with for sure.
Then about the occult, if you could choose, like, okay, this is the starting point with this author or a book, like.
Yeah. Oh man, that would be a very, very tough one. At this point in my older age, I would say if you're interested in anything truly esoteric, I would say pick up some of the main Greek philosophers. I would start there, and if you just lose interest right away, then you know. So,
if you're not in for philosophy and the Greeks are there, and if you can't handle that, fuck off.
And so it really depends what people are looking for. A lot of times in black metal, people are looking for stuff that's aesthetically very dark and evil, and you know, so they're gonna maybe want to lead more towards something that's overtly satanic or something like that. And there's plenty of that stuff out there. So, but I kind of like to, you know, look towards tradition, especially the older I get. So, yeah, that's something that I would recommend to anybody that's, or even deeply interested in even modern philosophy that might start getting an interest in the world of the occult. As I would look at specific Greek philosophers.
Any favorite one, by the way?
I really like Iamblichus. And I like the other mid to Neoplatonists that are invested in what's called the apophatic, and that's kind of realizing divinity through negativity, and so that can get into a very, very steep conversation quickly. Iamblichus, Plotinus would be another one. And then there's a few others, but Proclus. Iamblichus is probably currently my favorite. Ask me next year, it'll be someone else. So yeah.
Okay, since we've talked all about philosophy and esoteric stuff and all that stuff, now if we got some kind of a word of wisdom to finish this interview, like this is something that you need to take into your heart when you're done with the interview, what would you say?
Oh, I just say, we have to realize that everything that we experience now and in this mode that we are in is temporal, you know, and so you really have to decide who you are and what your purpose is, and chase whatever that is now, because life is fleeting. So
those are very true words. I mean, you only live once, supposedly, so make the time count, and don't waste your time in a foolish errands, but make it count. This is Akhlys, great music, and we're gonna expect some interesting live today. Go check out the discography. If that doesn't give you nightmares, I don't know what will. But there you have it. I hope you enjoyed our time with Akhlys, and see you soon with more stuff coming your way. Check out the band, and you will find links provided in the description box. See ya. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Now, before
excellent questions.
Thank you. Excellent answers. Before I let you go, we'll finish by taking a photo, if you don't mind.
Sure.
This will be used for social media later on, especially.